Some war machines defy belief as to how they are built, and moreover, how they actually function. None more so than the submarine, which can go for days without resurfacing. The vessel is one of the most intricate designs of all military equipment and has a ton of things to take into account. Stay with us, as today we're discussing exactly how submarines work. You won't want to miss this one. First of all, we're talking about diving and surfacing. Of course, the whole point of the submarine is for it to dive to depths of the ocean and then resurface hours, sometimes days later, in a completely different location. But how? The submarine floats due to buoyancy. No shocks there. But to dive, the sub fills what are known as ballast tanks with water, meaning there is no longer any buoyancy in the vessel. Hence, it sinks. Of course, a submarine can control its buoyancy in the complete opposite way in which a ship cannot, which means it can either choose to be on the surface or patrolling the seabed. The water in the ballast tanks is then vented to make sure it's denser than the ocean water outside, which causes the vessel to dive. Compressed air is used aboard the sub for life support, while also ensuring the dive is safe through the hydroplanes, or short wings on the stern, which ensure the dive angle isn't too severe. Of course, the sub needs to be level at any depth, which is maintained by balancing air and water in the trim tanks, so that it's equal to the water outside the vessel. The sub travels level by leveling the hydroplanes, and is steered using the tail rudder. Cool! When it's time to surface, the captain simply reverses the process and forces the water out of the ballast tanks using compressed air. The hydroplanes are also angled in such a way to ensure the sub moves upward. Interesting stuff, right? What about the onboard water supply then? Let's see. What better than a system that turns seawater into drinking water for the submarine sailors? I mean, they would kind of be missing a trick if someone hadn't thought of that, right? All modern subs are kitted out with a piece of equipment known as a distillation plant, which takes in seawater and heats it up, turning it into a vapor in the process. Then the system removes the salt and cools it in a collecting tank. And then, voila! Fresh, drinkable water. Some systems are capable of processing up to 150,000 liters of fresh water per day. So it's safe to say the guys and gals aboard aren't going to go thirsty. The main thing the water on board a sub is used for is cooling equipment. But problems occur when the system fails, which means they have to surface within a matter of hours. Would you like to spend a long amount of time on a sub? Not for us, we don't think. And what about the air purity? Stay tuned to find out. Of course, being below the surface of the oceans for months at a time means the sailors have to access fresh air. If you think back to biology class, you probably remember that the gas we breathe out is mainly carbon dioxide, which unfortunately is no use for breathing in. For a sub to make sure its air is breathable, a few things need to happen first. First, as soon as oxygen is consumed, it needs to be replenished. People suffocate when the percentage of oxygen in the air is too low. Second, carbon dioxide needs to be filtered out as it can be toxic in high quantities. And last, moisture from exhaling must also be removed. Modern submarines have computerized sensors on board, which continuously monitor the amount of oxygen in the air and release just the right amount from pressurized tanks. CO2 is removed from the air by things known as scrubbers, which use soda lime, sodium hydroxide, and calcium hydroxide to trap the carbon dioxide and then remove it from the air supply. And moisture is simply removed by using a dehumidifier, which you're probably familiar with if you've ever lived in a humid place. How do submarines maintain a warm temperature then? As you can probably imagine, the bottom of the ocean can be a weird and wonderful place, but also very, very cold. The average temperature under the waves is about 4 degrees Celsius, which you wouldn't last long in if you were down there without any protection. Subs are electrically heated to provide a comfortable temperature for their workers, which is obtained from either batteries, reactors, or diesel engines. Do you prefer to be hot or cold? Sorry, warm isn't an option. How do they maintain power then? Stay with us to hear all about it. Of course, pretty much everything on board a sub uses power, so this one is essential, and most subs are kitted out with diesel engines, which burn fuel, as well as nuclear reactors, which use nuclear fission. The electrics are generally run off of batteries, and the power uses the diesel engine or the nuclear reactor. Diesel submarines have diesel engines, which also recharge a large battery bank while providing power, so as long as they're running, all is well. In general, there are 2 engines, one which can be used to drive a propeller, while the other can be used to drive a generator. The sub must come to the ocean's surface to be able to use the diesel engines, but once they've recharged the batteries, off they go back again to the depths of the ocean. So if a sub's battery system fails, there's no way it would be able to submerge, which means it's imperative these systems are maintained and checked round the clock. When nuclear power came around, it was seen as a huge advantage for submarines, as they don't need oxygen to operate, so they can stay submerged for weeks or even months at a time. And the reactors on board a nuclear sub are almost the exact same as the ones you will find in a power plant, which is a cool little fact. What do you guys think of all this? How on earth do they find their way around this? Some fish at the very bottom of the ocean actually have their own source of light, which lights up the area around them, which gives you an idea of just how dark and gloomy it is down there. So how do these megasubs find their way around? Well, given the fact that we are now extremely advanced technologically, it's not as difficult as you might think. Submarines rely on things like GPS to determine latitude and longitude, but this only works on the surface. Once they're submerged, they use inertial guidance systems, which use gyroscopes to determine the vessel's motion. These things must be realigned every 150 hours, with a quick trip to the surface, using things like satellites and other surface navigation systems, such as radar and GPS. All of this means a sub's captain can navigate within 100 feet of its target, which is pretty crazy. If a sub wants to locate a target, it will use something called sonar, which sends out sound waves, which then bounce back off of the target and alert the sub to where it is. All this is calculated by knowing the speed of sound in water, which allows the onboard computer to determine distance and locate the target to within a matter of inches. Other big sea animals use the exact same technique too, which is super cool. So what if something was to go wrong? Let's see. You might remember the incident of the Kursk, the Russian sub, which had an onboard explosion and sank to the bottom of the ocean, killing all on board, sadly. This is the very real risk when dealing with submarines, and it's a wonder it doesn't happen more often, to be honest. If a sub goes down for whatever reason, be it loss of power, a collision, or as with the Kursk, an onboard explosion, the crew will immediately radio a distress call, which will pinpoint the sub's location. Depending on how much of a risk there is on board, the nuclear reactors can then be shut down, and the sub will have a certain amount of time to survive on battery power before rescue. The main dangers facing them are, of course, flooding, using up their oxygen supply, too much carbon dioxide in the air, and eventually the batteries running out. All this means that time is at a premium, and if the authorities on the surface are not on the ball, as happened with the Kursk, then it will almost certainly end in disaster. Rescue must be swift and will generally involve some sort of vehicle being sent down, or alternatively, the sub being raised with the help of another vessel. Another method could include pontoons being placed around the vessel and inflated to try to float it to the surface. Whatever happens, with submarine disasters, time is absolutely critical. As always, thanks for dropping in today, and remember to join us again next time when we'll be discussing some more fun bits and pieces. And why not like and share today's video with any submarine enthusiasts you might have lurking in the depths of those socials. Sorry. Bye, guys.